You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. Before we dive into this powerful episode, please remember to subscribe to our channels and to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes and to continue hustling. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Sherman College of Chiropractic, New Patients in a Box, the Influencer Authority Podcast Training, Mango Voice, Community Healthcare Resources, Life Chiropractic College West. Let's hustle.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 410 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I am your producer, Luke Millette, and here's your host, James Chester.
So today we had the opportunity of interviewing Dr. Jack Bourla. And if you want to understand why it's important to have a servant's heart for chiropractic, stay tuned. Welcome back. This is another episode of the Chiro Hustle podcast, number 410. That is the 410th episode of the Chiro Hustle podcast. And we are weaving together a tapestry of the chiropractic story. I'm really excited to have Jack Bourla on with me today. But before we jump into his story, I'm just going to tell you guys a couple cool things, why we do what we do over here at Chiro Hustle. We do protect freedom of speech. If you don't know what your rights are, go find that out. Go look for freedom of speech in your favorite search engine and find out why it's so important, specifically for health media. We do also protect the sacred trust of chiropractic. If you don't know what that means, which I think a lot of people should probably know, that's why I do an intro of this every time, Jack. Go do your favorite search engine and say, what is BJ Palmer's sacred trust? And then you'll know why this show is so profound for the chiropractic profession. And then we do support subluxation-based chiropractic. We do interview some mixers too. So I think that there's room for all of us at the table, and we're all more alike than we are different. So there's still a chance for the mixer to get their story across too. And on top of that, we do believe in universal intelligence and innate intelligence. And then when someone gets adjusted, it connects them, the physical, to them, the spiritual. And with that being said, welcome to the show, Dr. Jack Bourla.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, I know it's a mouthful for me to actually tell people every time the major premise of why we do this show.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have a certain grounding so you know where to leap from.
Well, I believe that we've done something really important, and we've created an elite platform for people to share their stories, and we focus very clearly on chiropractic. Yeah. And one of those things is your story. And I know you've been in different levels of participation within this beautiful profession of chiropractic for 25 years. Yeah. And we were talking about, how we were brought up before we got onto the interview, and a little bit about your story of your dad coming from Northern Africa, Algeria, to New York and making his way to California, and how all he did is hustle. But he instilled some of these things in you as well, which I've read your background here, and it's super, super cool. So we're going to call this the Ask the Jack Bourla show. And if you don't know Dr. Bourla, you don't know Jack.
You don't know Jack. There you go.
So open up with us. Tell us your story and how you got into this profession.
Sure. So as a Jewish boy, you really don't have a choice of two professions. You're either going to be an attorney or you'll be a doctor. That was it. And I know I didn't want to wake up every morning to argue with people, so I thought I'll become a doctor. And I remember when I was 12 years old, my father and I had a routine every morning. We'd get up really early in the morning, and he was always into health stuff. And so he would do a yogurt with some fresh fruit and some granola. This is before this was all popular. And we would read the newspaper together. He would give me a section of newspaper, and he would take a section, and then we would swap sections, and he would quiz me on what I read. And the reason is when he came to America from Algeria, he found this to be a great privilege, and he wanted us to understand that with this privilege came news and came information about politics and sports and business and entertainment. And so he would quiz me, and he gave me a section one day. And I remember reading, I was 12 years, it was 1967, I was 12 years old. I read about the first successful human heart transplant by a doctor named Christian Bernard. And I was fascinated even back then at the age of 12 that how could you take tissue from someone else's body, transplant it into another person's body, and with some manipulation of the immune system, have that body survive and live. And I was introduced to this idea that the body is intelligent. And that always stayed with me. And so as I went through all my academics, my elementary school, junior high school, and college, I always had in the back of my mind that the human body was a fascination for me. And so I did cell and molecular biology as an undergraduate, and I did physiology and behavioral biology in a master's program with every intention of going to medical school because I want to be a medical doctor. But I wanted to be a medical doctor. I wanted to be a cosmetic surgeon for disfigured kids. And what I wanted to do was travel around the world with this group called Doctors Without Borders and provide services for these children who were born with disfigurations, who without repair of that disfigurement would probably not leave a very fulfilled life. And so that was my goal. I wanted to get through medical school, get into the specialty of cosmetic surgery, not to make, men and women look pretty. I was going to really take care of the severely disfigured kids. And as fate would have it, I met a woman at a very young age and fell in love and became married. And she had 2 children. And so now I was faced with the responsibility of being a husband and a stepfather of 2 kids. I was still in school. I was still in graduate school. And it was very obvious that medical school was not going to be a thing for me. And so I started doing other things. While I was a graduate student at San Francisco State University, I taught. I was a lecturer in biology. I had a huge class. I had 440 students in a human sexuality class. I worked as a family planning counselor. I worked in Stanford and ran their blood center, administratively ran the blood center. And while I was there, I became very good friends with the 2 medical directors who were in the midst of starting a brand new biotech company. And they asked me if I would be willing to go run that company with them. I said, of course I would. So I left Stanford to go run a biotech company, did that for 10 years, had just a great career in biotechnology. But my boss was a senior vice president. I was a director, and he wasn't going anywhere. And so I decided to do something really smart. And that is I went and I bought 3 restaurants. I owned and operated 3 restaurants. That was the dumbest thing I've ever done in my whole life. But I did that. And when I got done with my career in the restaurant business, I thought, what am I going to do next? And I was reminded of something that happened to my first wife. It was a New Year's Day. We had gone out the night before. Everyone was fine. We went to bed. She woke up that morning on New Year's Day, and she was unable to move her legs for unknown reasons. And so I picked her up, put her in the car, took her to the local emergency room where they evaluated her, they examined her, they imaged her, they injected her, they medicated her. And by about 3:30 in the afternoon, there was absolutely no change in her condition at all. And they said, that's all we can do. You might as well go home and see what happens. So we went home, and I was, distraught, but like I do on every New Year's Day, I call my closest friends to wish them a Happy New Year. And one of my friends, I told the story to, and he says, why don't you call my chiropractor? And I had never been to a chiropractor before. I didn't even know what chiropractic was. I said, well, what is a chiropractor going to do that the best facility in our area could not do? He says, I don't know, but call him. I said, all right, I'll call him. He says, no, call him today. So he gave me his number, and I called, and the guy answered. The first thing I thought is, what whack job is going to answer his phone on New Year's Day? And I could hear his kids in the background. And I explained my situation to him. And he says, okay, I'll meet you at the office at 5:30. I said, okay, where's your office? He told me, I said, I'll see you tomorrow. He goes, no, I'll see you today. I said, it's New Year's Day. He says, it might be New Year's Day, but I took an oath. And I'll never forget those words. I took an oath. And his oath was that he was going to help people no matter what day it was, no matter how much he could do it. So he did. So I put her back in the car at 5:30. I showed to his office. I carried her in. We explained what her situation was. He explained what he was going to do. And he told me that I'm going to be looking for this thing in her spine. And I don't remember the name of it. I was really, I wasn't paying total attention, but it had a very complicated name. And I thought he said something about a submarine, but it was not a submarine. It was something else. And he said, if I find what I think I'm going to look for, I can help her. And so he took his own x-rays. I had to hold her up, and he explained what he found on the x-rays. He said, this is what I'm going to do. And he put her on this table that went up and down, and he made this thing which he called the adjustment, and she walked out. And I thought, holy smokes, if that can happen to her, I imagine what it would do for me. And so she and I went every Friday afternoon. We never missed an appointment for years and years and years until he passed away. And when he died, we went to another chiropractor every Friday, and we never missed. And so I had in the back of my mind, this chiropractic thing is pretty cool. And so when it was time for me to look for a new career, I looked in the Bay Area, and there happened to be two colleges. One was Palmer West and one was Life West. And I looked into research both of them. And Palmer West was named after the family that discovered and developed chiropractic. So I said, I'll go there. And so I went to Palmer West, and I went as a 39-year-old. So I was the oldest student in the class. And I remember the very first day when I sat in those classrooms and listened to the information that they were providing. I said, this is where I should have been when I was 22. But I'm 39, so I got a lot of time to make up. So I studied like you would not believe. I actually graduated, taught my class. I graduated as a valedictorian, brought a bunch of people along with me. I had a great study group. In fact, all of us studied, the 5 of us in our study group finished in the top 5 of the class. But we loved chiropractic. And back then they were teaching some philosophy. And we learned about the innate wisdom of the body. We learned about universal intelligence. We learned about the 33 principles. And not to the extent that I know them now, but we learned about those things. And that was intriguing to me because I had this idea about this heart being transplanted and what intelligence must be in the body to allow that happen. And so I was carrying forward with me from the time I was 12 till now I'm 39. So 27 years of that idea that there's an intelligent wisdom within the body, which helps to direct and regulate and organize and help heal that body. And so I loved chiropractic from the very first day that I hit that school, and I haven't stopped loving it.
Well, you have a lot of story there that I need to do some unpacking with. And I'm really excited because a lot of people don't give themselves hope later in life to have the life of their dreams and to jump into a career that's more fitting for them.
Yeah.
I jumped into chiropractic at 30, by the way. And I had no idea how much of an advocate somebody could be for a profession that had so much great leadership.
Yeah.
And, you know, growing up in Davenport, Iowa, where the profession started, I felt like there was somewhat of a connection for me to be do some meaningful work within this chiropractic world.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the semblance of growing up in Davenport doesn't make you like any more. I mean, I could go right there now and there's 60,000 people that live there that have no idea what chiropractic is or have any connection to it. I don't know how BJ Palmer's spirit just said, Jim Chester, go out there and serve chiropractic. But something lit me up, man. So when I hear your story about jumping in later in life to be a chiropractor, it's not too late for anybody to jump into this profession and contribute.
It's never too late to do anything, whether it's chiropractic, whether it's whatever it is that you want to do. I think the important thing is you have to have a conviction about being of service. And then if you have that heart for service, then you have to ask yourself, where can I best place that service? And for me, chiropractic just made sense. The experience of watching my first wife go from not being able to move her legs to walking out of that office was a mind-blowing thing for me. And that just triggered in me this idea that anything's possible, right? Despite what other people might say, despite what the medics said. And this is not the fault of medics. They do the best job they can. I don't have anything bad to say about the medics in general. But despite what they did, someone had a different perspective. And that perspective led to her being able to walk and led to me being able to have a new career, which I feel so strongly about. I can't imagine doing anything but what I do every single day.
Well, do you know why it works that way? It's because of the scope of practice. And chiropractor's scope of practice is to not add anything into the body, not to remove anything, but to locate, detect, and correct vertebral subluxation.
Yeah.
So there's that word that you didn't know what it was back in the day.
Yeah.
It wasn't submarine.
Yeah. And actually, you know, and what you said is great, but to be more accurate, we have to locate, we've got to analyze, and then we assist the body to make the correction. We don't really make the correction. And I think this is where the distinction is important, because when you do that, when you say that you assist the body, then you're really giving credit to the body for making that correction. And that's where the magic happens, when the body does what it's intended to do. And many people call that miraculous, and I call that amazing physiology.
Well, a lot of people that know me, Jack, know that I have some foundations and some fundamentals that make up who I became and who I am today. And that's connection, that's adventure, that's leadership, that's freedom, and that's contribution. But I added one more, and you said a really profound word there, and it's magic.
Magic.
Yeah. So now my sixth element is magic within my life values, because nothing really happens unless there's a little magic involved.
Yeah, and that's what makes it exciting. Right? When you think you know everything, you learn something new.
Yeah.
There's just so much to learn. There's so much to do. There's so much good that can be done, and you just have to have the heart to do it, and then you have to have the ability to put yourself into action. Because you can think about things all day long and wish about things all day long, but until you go into action, they'll never get done.
One of my favorite episodes we ever did was with Les Brown, and he said,
Yeah.
"Do you know where the greatest ideas in the world are? They're in the graveyard, because people had them and didn't do anything with them."
Yeah. And how true is that? I mean, imagine where we might be as a society if some of those ideas had actually put into real life action, and where we could be now.
That's why I believe chiropractic is a very important, as Liam Schubel would say, to the future and development of the planet.
Yeah, the transformation and evolution of the planet.
Yeah, I mean that's spot on. And I know you've done some close work with Liam. Tell me a little bit about that. What's it been like to work with Liam?
He has very high standards, and I appreciate that, because so do I. He is a man of action. So, he's controversial. Some people really love him. Some people don't really love him at all. Some people can't stand him, and that's fine. We're all entitled to have our opinions. But the one thing you have to look at is, has he moved the profession in a positive direction? And I think he has. He went down to South America, not even speaking the language, and within a very short amount of time began to see a tremendous number of people. And he saw the changes in lives that was happening, and that told him, I need to serve bigger. And so he opened a second office, and then a third office. And I think he's got 20 or 21 offices now. It's a lot of offices, and they're all intended to serve the people. And that's why you go to your office every morning. You can go and you can make a really good living, but I think the satisfaction of knowing that you're serving people, and as a result of your service, you're making a living, I think that's a nice formula to have. And so he is looking globally at chiropractic and the effects that chiropractic has. And I think that Sid Williams was a huge influence on him. I think Sid Williams and Fred Barge and Reggie Gold all had big, powerful influences on him. And if you hear him speak, you'll see that there's a little bit of each one of those. And he's developed his own techniques, of course, but you can hear some of those characteristics that those fine people had in Liam Schubel today. So it was a fun time. We worked together. We actually developed Schubel Vision Seminar Company, where we had intentionally gone to different on or near different campuses, chiropractic campuses. And I'm not going to brag, but I'm going to. It was my idea to have 5 students featured in all of our seminars. And so wherever camps were, whether it would be Palmer or Life or Davenport or Parker, wherever we found ourselves, we invited 5 students to share a little bit about their understanding of chiropractic. 1, to build leadership, but 2, to show other people in the field what's possible with these young minds. And so that was the thing that we did with Schubel Vision seminars. And since then, I don't work with them anymore. I'm still great friends with Liam and Judd and Frankie Hahn. But they've gone on and now they have their own coaching company, and they're doing their own thing. But working with someone like Liam has been a really great experience.
Oh, it's really cool, because I met you guys on the same day.
Yeah.
And you guys were at Mile High at a chiropractic seminar, and I showed up with a little camera and some lights and a big idea.
Right.
And you guys had no idea who this guy was that was coming in, that was wanting to change the world and the perception of chiropractic for the public. And Danny Knowles vouched for me, and he put me into you and Liam. And ever since then, I've had such a high level of admiration for both of you guys. Well, and I consider both of you guys friends. And it's been really cool. So. Well, when I was a kid, my mom would always tell me that you're only as good as the company that you keep. Yeah. And the past 13 years, all I've done is spent time with doctors. And I think that that's something really profound to tell people is if you work really hard and you have a big vision and you find a great group of people to support, they'll support you back.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, this speaks highly about Danny Knowles, because we didn't know who you were, but Danny said, trust me, this is going to be a good project. He's a good guy. He's 100%, an advocate for what we're doing. So we did it. And I don't have any regrets. On the contrary, we've been able to maintain a friendship over these years. And when we find ourselves together, it's always fun.
You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Sherman College of Chiropractic, New Patients in a Box, the Influencer Authority Podcast Training, Mango Voice, Community Healthcare Resources, Life Chiropractic College West. Let's hustle. Yeah, then that's just it. Is now I'm looking to coming out to the Bay Area in October, and hopefully get a chance to spend some time with you and to learn some more about Jack. So
I hope so.
We still have some time left in this interview, so I'm really excited to ask you. There's the triune: science, philosophy, and art.
Yeah.
Let's break them down a little bit and explain to the world a little bit of your involvement with the science part of it and why science and research is so important to chiropractic first.
Well, I was exposed to science and research when I was in biotech.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent 10 years of my life in biotech, and at one point I was the administrative project manager for the lead product, which was interleukin-2, and it's a cytokine. It modulates the immune system. And so I learned how to read research and then apply it. And hanging out with some pretty brilliant minds. In fact, one of the minds that I hung out with is a guy named Kerry Mullis. Kerry Mullis is a guy, and this was before he earned his PhD. Kerry Mullis is a guy who founded the PCR technology and won a Nobel Prize for that. He had this idea. He had a scientific basis, a scientific background, and he was actually traveling up to his mountain home in Lake Tahoe, and he had an idea, and he turned around, went back to the lab, and over the weekend began to develop PCR technology. And so I have this appreciation for science, because science, it validates what you're thinking about. You ask a question and then you do some experimentation, and that science is what either validates or invalidates, and they're both important information. Unfortunately, what we don't see a lot in the literature is that a scientist will ask a question and then it didn't turn out the way they want it, and they don't publish the negative results when you should, for a couple of reasons. One, so someone else doesn't repeat what you did and do the wrong thing. But knowing something works and something doesn't work, those are both important pieces of information to have. Mm-hmm. So in science, it's important for us to validate, what are we doing? We have this idea that we're going to locate and then analyze and then assist the body to correct a vertebral subluxation. Well, how do we know we did that? Well, that's going to take some objective measures, and that's part of the science, right? So when you study cause and effect in the body, that's a scientific question. And so it's important to have, I don't think you have to be a PhD level, like an Amy Haas, who is brilliant. But I don't know if you know Amy, but she's one of the most brilliant people on two legs. But she has this appreciation because of her background in science. She has a PhD in science. And so she knows so much about the science. Now, do we all have to know that? No, but we need to know people like Amy who can help us with that and publish articles and help it and break it down so that we, more of the lay people, can understand the science. But we have science which validates the questions that we ask, which is part of the philosophy, right? So if you don't have a philosophy, then you really don't, where are you going to go? So the chiropractic philosophy is, it's based on the 33 principles, and it's based on this notion that there's an intelligence within the body that helps to regulate it, organize it, and help it to heal and be who you are. So that's the philosophy. So now we look for things to validate the philosophy, and that is, well, we're going to do an art, right? We'll make the adjustment, and then we want to know, well, what effect did my making the adjustment have on this individual's physiology? And then you have to go back to the science, because if you're not measuring pre and post, then you're guessing. And the one thing we can't do in our profession is guess. It's like if you went to your medical doctor and he looked you over and he said, or she looked you over and she said, I think you're diabetic. And the first thing you're going to ask is, well, how do you know? Well, I have a feeling. Well, that's not good enough, right? So if you're going to a chiropractor and they're not doing some sort of a measurement to decide, is this person's physiology compromised by the vertebral subluxation, then you might want to go to somebody else. So you have to do this pre-check, which will help you to decide. And then you do your analysis, you do your palpation, you do your whatever it is that you use to decide where that subluxation is. And then you make the correction, you assist the body to make this correction. And then you go back and check, did we get a desired effect? Right? If you went to your doctor and they said, I think you have diabetes and we're just going to give you some medicine, and they never did a post-check, you don't know if it's working or not. So that's as insane as it gets. So why would you want to do it in chiropractic? You don't guess in chiropractic. We have the tools to be very, very precise in how we do things. And so the chiropractors that aren't doing that, I would encourage them to start doing that. Learn from someone else who is doing that. There's so many different things. You can do thermography. You can do heart rate variability. You can use EMG. You can do all kinds of things to decide, is this physiology compromised in some way? And then is the vertebral subluxation the cause of that? And once that vertebral section has been corrected, you go back and check and say, is there a desired change? So there's the philosophy, the science, and the art. And all three are important. And by the way, there's another couple of factors. One is communication. How are you communicating what you're doing to your patients that by the way, you're privileged to serve, right? So if you don't walk into your office every morning with a servant's heart, then don't go into your office until you do. But you have to know how to talk to people, right? My good friend Sean Dill says you can educate them or you can empower them. And I like the notion of empowering, allowing them to have information so they can make intelligent decisions on their own and not you having to lead them all the time. So there's communication, and then you got to have business skills, right? It is a business. If you don't consider chiropractic a business, then you're not going to pay your bills and you're not going to be a chiropractor very long. And so there really are, there's a tradition, there's a science, the philosophy, and the art, but there's also this communication concept, and there's the business systems and business concepts that you have to be versed at. You have to have those in place, otherwise you won't be in practice very long. And if you're not in practice, you can't serve. And if you're not serving, then chiropractic suffers.
Well, you said some really important things there that I just want to circle back to.
Sure.
And one of those things was diagnostic tools. What's your stance on X-ray? I know you said HRV, thermography, and
so X-ray is an important tool for some techniques. X-rays in and of themselves tell you nothing about the physiology. Those are anatomical studies. So I think that if you use X-rays, that's excellent, but I don't know anybody who uses X-rays that doesn't also use a physiological measure. Because the body adapts. I mean, you look at some of the spines that BJ collected. And the question we have to ask ourselves is that an anomaly or is that an intelligent adaptation to whatever that person was experiencing? And what we really want to know is, what effect does that anatomy have on the physiology? Because after all, vertebral subluxation in of itself is nothing unless it's affecting the mental impulse, and that's a physiological property.
Well, I know you've done a lot of reading and a lot of research within this chiropractic profession, which I really admire about you. Who are some of your heroes that helped inspire you to become the practitioner you are today?
Oh boy, so many, and even today I still have them. So I would be remiss to not start with Andy Roberts. Andy Roberts unfortunately passed away in 2016, but Andy Roberts was my hero. He was my dear friend. I met him through Sean Dill. Sean Dill and I have a great relationship. We still do. And Sean Dill introduced me to Andy Roberts. And when I first met Andy Roberts, I thought this is the biggest ass on 2 feet. Because of that antagonistic relationship we had, we became very close. In fact, we spoke or chatted every single night before we went to bed. And Andy would ask you questions. He was very Socratic in how he would teach. And he could convince you to change your mind. Like, for example, if we looked outside and it was a nice sunny day, and he'd ask me, is that daytime or nighttime? And I'd say, well, it's daytime. And he'd say, you're a fool. Let me tell you why it's nighttime. And he would come up with arguments for why it was a nighttime by asking me varying questions. So we would have these challenges every single night. And in fact, if people didn't know who we are, they would think that we'd be fighting. But we always ended our conversations with, good night, brother. I love you. Talk to you tomorrow. I had admiration for him. In fact, I'm fortunate enough We were both part of the Delta Sigma Chi chiropractic fraternity, and his wife, upon his passing, sent me his jersey, which I have hung up in my office on my wall as admiration, as a reminder, because Andy had a philosophy, and that is you could either be mediocre or you could be a master. And which one do you want to be? And so when I look at his jersey, I'm reminded that I'm supposed to be a master in my office. And so I don't take any shortcuts, especially with a human life, because you never know when you're going to make that one adjustment that could change the trajectory of someone's life from being really crappy to being something very excellent. And if we have time, I'd love to tell you about the story of my son, Evan, and how important that is. But Andy Roberts is important. Sean Dill was important because Sean Dill challenged me to think about philosophy and the proper application of science to the philosophy. Amy Haas inspires me. Monique Andrews and Tamara McIntyre are two of my favorite people on the planet. I would consider huge influences in who I am. Steve Tullius is a huge influence for me. Scott Garber is a huge influence for me. Lacey Book is a huge influence for me. Edwin Cordero, the president at Sherman, I respect and honor him because I know where he came from, what he's done with that college, and thank God he showed up when he did, because I think that Sherman College is the elite college in the world, at least right now, and I hope it continues to be that way. Boy, who else? Judd O'Grady was a big influence. Frankie Hahn are big influences. Travis Corcoran in the Netherlands is a huge influence. Anker Tayal, huge influence for me. There's so many, and I hate to not mention all of them, but if we did, we'd be here for a couple of days. But I've been blessed, Jim, with the opportunity to be in the presence of some of these incredible minds, incredible souls, incredible hearts who have maybe better. The Knowles family. I mean, they're incredible. I remember when I was just out of school studying every Friday with Joel Kinch, and he and I would have lunch every Friday, and we'd talk chiropractic, we talked religion, we talked everything. And he remains a big influence. There's so many people who have influenced my life. And I am indebted to all of them because they've all added something to me to make the totality of who Jack is.
So I want you to share the story about Evan.
Yeah.
I'm really inspired because our pre-chat, you were sharing with me how powerful it is to be a father. And I think it'd be really cool for you to share that story with our audience today.
Sure. You want me to tell you the story about the three questions, or want me to tell you the story about why I'm convicted to become a chiropractor? Or you want to tell you both?
Well,
I'll tell you both?
We'll tell both.
Okay. So I did a talk at Sherman's Lyceum just a couple of months ago, and it was about BJ Palmer and who BJ would have been had he not made some really serious choices. He called himself an alley rat, a wharf rat, an alley cat, a wharf rat, and a no good for nothing person, because he grew up on the streets in Davenport like someone else we know. And he was in the company of a hypnotist, and it changed his mind to knowing that he could become anything he wanted to be. And so BJ was all about mindset. It's about what you think about and the actions that you do to support what you think about. And as I was telling you earlier with my son, I don't know what goes on in the outside world with him. You know, as soon as he leaves our front door in the morning and goes to school, there's outside influences. But I want him to know that before he leaves, he has the opportunity to have a positive mindset. And so I ask him 3 questions every single day, and he answers these questions every single day. And he rolls his eyes when he's finished. But the first question I asked him was, "Who are you?" And his answer is, "I'm the GOAT, the greatest of all time." And I say, "And what's our family motto?" And he says, "Winners always win." And then I ask him, "What is our purpose to be on planet Earth?" And he says, "To leave it better than we found it." And with that, I give him a big kiss and a hug, and I wish him well, and I send him off to school, knowing that I hopefully planted consistently these seeds of positivity in his mind so that when he goes out into the outer world, he can handle whatever gets thrown at him. And thank God so far he's done a pretty good job. But he is an important part of my being a chiropractor. So when my wife was pregnant with him, she was studying space engineering in Strasbourg, France. She was at the International Space University, and she wanted to study space engineering. And so she was pregnant with him. We would talk every night at that time. We were talking on Skype. And she said to me, "I would really like to have a home delivery." And I said, "Well, it's, you know, your body, your choice. I will support you in any way you want." I said, "Why don't we independently research midwives in our area and we'll compare notes and we'll see what we come up with. So we did that, and we actually came up with the same person, which was awesome. So when she came back from school, we began to attend the classes to learn what a home birth was going to be like. And so we, every Wednesday and every Saturday, we went and attended these classes. So we kind of knew what was going on. And our son was to be born on August 11th. And on July 30th, we were at the vet's, and her water broke. And so the first thing that I did, like any other man whose wife's water breaks, is you freak out, right? What do I do? And she's, calm down, call Rosanna, let her know. So I called Rosanna. I said, Rosanna, her water broke. What do we do? She said, go home. You know what to do. So I took her home, and with each passing moment, this is about 5:30 in the afternoon, with each passing moment, her groans were getting louder and longer. And with each passing groan, I'm freaking out. I was trying to keep calm, but I'm a guy. I'm a Jewish guy too, so we don't do all this kind of stuff. But I'm doing what I had to do. I got her up and down. We're doing the leg stretches. She's breathing. I put her in the tub, take her out of the tub, the whole thing. Finally, around 9:30, knock on the door. Rosanna's there with her 4 assistants. I was never so happy to see so many women at my front door that late at night. So they came in, and she examined her, and she said, boy, she really should be delivering this kid. She's fully dilated. And then she went and examined her again, and she determined that Evan had passed his first bowel movement with the meconium, and the danger there is that if they aspirate that into her lungs, you could be in big trouble. So she said, we got to call an ambulance. So we called an ambulance, we took her to the hospital. Fortunately for us, there was a midwife on staff in the emergency room, and so our midwife exchanged information with that midwife, and she said to me, the midwife, do you mind if I monitor the baby? I said, you do whatever you have to do to make sure that kid and this woman leave here healthy. So she did something, they put a little something on her scalp, and she said to me, he's in great distress. We're going to call the emergency pediatrician. I said, don't tell me what you're going to just do it. Just whatever you need to do. And so she called in, and she was doing all kinds of stuff. And apparently what happened, Jim, is that even though she was fully dilated, part of her cervix was caught on Evan's forehead. And every time she pushed out, he was being yanked back in. And so he wasn't making it through the birth canal. And she did something, and just as this guy, who's about 12 years old, by the way, walks into the room, out comes Evan. Now, I had been present for my daughter's delivery, so I knew what a normal delivery looked like, the crying and everything. And out came this blob of mass with no color, no movement. His eyes were kind of a yellow brown. He's got these beautiful blue-green eyes now. His eyes were kind of yellow brown, and he looked like a salamander. And I thought, holy crap, this is not good. And meanwhile, Erin had no idea. My wife had no idea what was going on. So I'd envisioned, cutting the umbilical cord, the whole ceremony. That never happened. She cut the umbilical cord, and she handed him off to Doogie Howser, the young doctor. And he's going to go do what he's going to do. And Erin, of course, has no idea what's going on. And I said, I'll be right back, honey. I'm going to go check on the baby. So I go check with the baby, and I go see the doctor. I said, doctor, give it to me straight. What's up? And he says, we don't know. I said, well, what are the possibilities? He says, well, one, he could die. I said, okay, that's not a possibility. What else you got for me? He says, well, he could be here for a long time. It depends on how much meconium he's actually aspirated. I said, what does that mean? He said, well, he could be here for days to weeks. We just don't know. I said, so what's the plan? He said, we're going to take him up into the NICU, the neonatal ICU. We'll work on him. We'll call you in a few hours and let you know what the status is. I said, okay, but before you do, I'd like to have this near lifeless blob of matter be held by his mother, because she may never have held anything like that had life in him. So he said, do it quickly. So as I was walking over to hand the baby to my wife, I'm thinking, his neck has been jammed for 6 hours. I wonder what that looks like. So I said, Erin, hold him. So she held him, and I palpated his neck. And, because that's where the brainstem is. That's where all the action in the body happens. Now, I didn't have thermography. I didn't have x-rays. I didn't have functional MRIs. I didn't have anything other than my hands and a great will to do something if I could do something. And so I palpated, and I remember his right atlas felt like it was in another room. So I gently made the adjustment that you do on babies, just a gentle fingertip adjustment. I don't even remember if it cavitated or not. It didn't matter. I took the baby back and gave him to the doctor, and up they went. And so I got Erin settled in her room, and after about 45 minutes, I said, I'm going to go check on the baby. And so I walked over to the neonatal ICU, and they have windows there so you can look in. And I look in it, and in the far distance of the room stood the doctor and the nurse at the foot of the bassinet, but they weren't doing anything. And my first inclination was that he died. And so I bust into this room where you're supposed to have a gown and mat. I bust in, and I said, doctor, what's happening? What's going on? And he says, we don't know. but he's completely normal. He has an APGAR score of 9+. You can look at him. He was crying. His color had come to his skin. His eyes were lighting up. He says, you can take him to his mom. And as I grabbed him and I brought him to his mom, I thought, what if I went to chiropractic college for 3.5 years of my life at the age of 39, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt for that one adjustment? And that convicted me. And so now every time I look into his eyes, so I kiss him goodnight every night and I kiss him hello in the morning. But every time I look into his eyes, I'm reminded of what my purpose on planet Earth, and that is to make life better for other people through chiropractic care. And so every day when I go to my office, I'm grateful for that at that time was a horrific event, but I'm grateful for it because it convicted me to be the chiropractor that I am today, to have the heart of a servant that I have today, and to know with certainty that what I do when it's done well can change the trajectory of anybody else's life.
Jack Bourla.
Yo, babe.
You are a dream interview. And I love that most of the questions I have to ask people, I didn't have to ask you. The conversation was so organic and smooth. You made my job really easy today.
Awesome.
And I thank you for sharing miracle stories, sharing friendship stories, sharing anything as possible stories, talking about this beautiful profession from science, philosophy, and art, talking about finding purpose, talking about why this profession matters and how it gives life to people. And every adjustment counts. So
indeed.
I want to thank you for being episode 410 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I look forward to having you on in the future. This was a profound episode.
Awesome.
Really, really valuable content and information that you shared with people. And your story is amazing. So
thank you.
The episode will be live on my Facebook page today. You can share it as you choose. And your episode will be coming out in about 3 months. So as podcasters, there's no stress in my game. I always make sure that we have plenty of pre-recorded episodes, but yours is 410. And I'm so thankful for you to be a part of this tapestry of chiropractic that we're weaving together. And your story is quite compelling. So thank you for sharing today.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the work that you're doing. It's important to have others other than chiropractors promoting what we do. And you know, you never know, like BJ said, you never know how far reaching. And that's so true. You know, if chiropractors have doubts, seek help. Everybody has something to offer. Keeping chiropractic as pure as we can, because that's the sacred trust. That's what we're admonished to do. Just do that. There's lots of people who would help. If anybody has questions, if you want to share my information with them, you certainly can. If there's any way that I can help anybody anytime, I'll try my best. And if I can't, I'll find someone who can. So
if anybody wants to connect with you or learn more about you, where can we send them to?
My email address is drjackbourla, Bourla, @gmail.com. My cell phone number is 650-465-3889. Call anytime. Texting is always better than calling because I rarely get to my phone, but I'll always return a text. If you're in the Bay Area, if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area and you want to hook up for a meal or a cocktail or just some time talking, I would love that as well. You're free to come by my office almost anytime.
What's the web address to your office?
It's www.prochirocenter.com. And it's Providence Chiropractic Center.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jack Bourla. Real honor. And I'm going to close out by telling you all that you guys are just one story away. Keep hustling. See you guys soon. Thank you, Jack.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim.
All right. Bye for now.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.